Hey everyone! Welcome back to Cinematic Odyssey. Today we're talking about something a little different, Hollywood's golden era and the stars who might have been gay, bi, or queer. From their childhood dreams to their rise or sometimes fall in the spotlight, we'll explore how they captured the hearts of millions while living in an era where being true to yourself wasn't always an option. Get comfy, grab some snacks, and let's dive into the lives of these old-school Hollywood legends. You might be surprised by what we uncover. James Dean. Okay, first up, James Dean didn't exactly have the easiest start in life.
You forgave him because you threw a ring of his worth $3,000 into the river.
That's right.
And you forgave him?
Born in 1931 in Marion, Indiana, he was super close to his mom, but tragically, she passed away when he was just 9 years old. Following his mother's death, Dean was sent back to Indiana to live with his aunt and uncle on their farm. This shift from the bustling life of California to the rural quiet of Indiana created a sense of dislocation for the young boy. His relationship with his father grew increasingly distant, marked by a lack of meaningful communication and connection. While Dean briefly reconnected with his father during his time at Santa Monica City College, their bond remained strained and largely superficial. Fast forward a bit, and James moved to LA to study drama, then later headed to New York. That's where he really got serious about acting, even landing a gig at the famous Actors Studio. Before you knew it, he was on his way to becoming a cultural icon with East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, and Giant. James Dean didn't just leave an impact on pop culture, he made history. Before him, no male actor had ever received a posthumous Oscar nomination. That changed in 1956 when Dean's gripping portrayal of Cal Trask, a conflicted teenager in East of Eden, earned him a Best Actor nod. His raw, emotional performance was groundbreaking, setting a new standard for method acting in Hollywood. But that wasn't the end of it. The very next year, Dean received another Best Actor nomination for his role as the ambitious, brooding ranch hand Jet Rink in Giant. It was a remarkable achievement for someone whose film career spanned just 3 major movies. Yet his personal life was anything but conventional. James Dean's sexuality has been a topic of debate and intrigue for decades, fueled by a mix of rumors, personal accounts, and biographical claims. His close relationship with William Bast, his best friend and an early biographer, added to the speculation. Bast openly claimed in his biography that he and Dean had been romantically involved for a time, and suggested Dean had hoped for a deeper connection down the line. Beyond this, many other biographers have explored Dean's relationships with men in Hollywood, painting a complex picture of his private life. Unfortunately, not all of these stories are flattering. Darwin Porter's controversial book Brando Unzipped alleged through unnamed sources that Dean and Marlon Brando were engaged in a sadomasochistic dynamic. While these claims are sensational and widely disputed, they've contributed to the mythology surrounding Dean's life. James himself famously said, "No, I'm not a homosexual, but I'm also not going to go through life with one hand tied behind my back." Reflects his refusal to adhere to societal expectations of the time. Tragically, just as he was hitting the peak of his career, James died in a car accident in 1955 at the age of 24. It's wild to think he only starred in 3 major films, but his legacy? Absolutely untouchable. So, was James Dean queer? We'll probably never know for sure, but one thing's for certain. He was unapologetically himself and lived life on his terms, which is pretty inspiring. Rock Hudson, born Roy Harold Scherer Jr. on November 17, 1925, in Winnetka, Illinois.
I want you to look especially nice tonight.
Rock Hudson didn't start life in the spotlight. His childhood was far from glamorous. His parents divorced early, and his stepfather gave him the surname Hudson. Struggling in school, he juggled odd jobs to support his family. After serving in the Navy during World War II, Hudson moved to Los Angeles with one goal: to become a star. It wasn't easy. He worked hard to overcome his lack of experience, even memorizing entire scripts since he couldn't read lines well at first. His agent famously said, "He's got the face of a god but the acting skills of a tree." Ouch. But with his striking good looks and determination, Hudson landed roles in romantic dramas like Magnificent Obsession and All That Heaven Allows, quickly becoming a household name. The 1950s were Rock's golden years. His performance in Giant, 1956, earned him an Academy Award nomination, cementing his place in Hollywood royalty. Pairing with Elizabeth Taylor and James Dean, he brought intensity and charm to the big screen. Then came his comedic era. Hudson's chemistry with Doris Day in films like Pillow Talk and Lover Come Back made him a rom-com legend. Together, they became one of cinema's most beloved duos, lighting up screens with their feel-good charm. While Rock Hudson's career soared, his personal life was a different story. Being gay in mid-20th century Hollywood was a career-ending risk. To maintain his image, his agent orchestrated a marriage to Phyllis Gates in 1955. The union was a facade, lasting just 3 years, but it kept the tabloids at bay for a while. Behind the scenes, Hudson's relationships were kept under wraps, and he lived in fear of his truth becoming public. Despite the pressure, he handled his private life with remarkable grace in an era that left little room for authenticity. In 1984, whispers of Hudson's declining health began circulating. The following year, the world learned that he had AIDS, making him the first major celebrity to publicly address the disease. His final public appearance alongside Doris Day to promote her animal charity shocked fans. The once vibrant star looked frail and unrecognizable, sparking an outpouring of concern. Hudson's diagnosis brought unprecedented attention to the AIDS epidemic, shattering stigmas and misconceptions. His death also led to a landmark lawsuit when his former partner, Mark Christian McGuinness, sued Hudson's estate, claiming the actor concealed his HIV status. The case was a pivotal moment in raising awareness about personal responsibility and HIV/AIDS, with McGuinness ultimately awarded $5.5 million in damages. Rock Hudson was more than just a Hollywood heartthrob. He was a trailblazer, even if he didn't set out to be one. His life is a reminder of the pressure stars face to fit into a mold and the bravery it took to break free from it. Liberace. Next up, Liberace.
Because of that, because of his flamboyant lifestyle and male friends, there have been questions about his sexual preferences.
That's right. Mr. Rhinestones himself, the king of sequins, and one of the most fabulous showmen to ever tickle the ivories. Let's rewind to May 16, 1919, in West Allis, Wisconsin. Liberace, born Rudolph Valentino Liberace, was the son of immigrant parents. His dad, an Italian musician, and his Polish mother clearly passed down the creative genes. Liberace was a piano prodigy, crushing classical recitals as a teenager. But playing classical music wasn't enough for him. He wanted to entertain. So, what did he do? He spiced things up. Liberace fused classical pieces with pop, jazz, and comedy, creating a style that was uniquely his own. By the 1950s, he wasn't just a pianist. He was a household name. His TV show, The Liberace Show, turned him into an international sensation. And the man knew how to put on a show. Rhinestones, jewel-encrusted cars, and stage sets so flashy they could blind you. Liberace didn't just perform, he gave his audience an experience. Oh, and those costumes? They weren't just outfits, they were statements. By now, Liberace was rolling in success and money. He had Las Vegas residencies, record-breaking tours, and even merchandise with his name on it. Basically, he was living the dream. Imagine rolling up to a concert in a car covered in jewels. Yes, that actually happened. But here's the thing. While Liberace's public life was all glitz and glam, his private life was complicated. Liberace never publicly came out as gay, and it's easy to understand why. In the mid-20th century, being openly gay could ruin your career, especially for someone as famous as he was. But behind the scenes, Liberace had long-term relationships with men, including Scott Thorson. Now here's where things got messy. Scott later sued him for palimony, leading to a very public court case. Their relationship was full of extravagance and drama, just like Liberace's stage persona. If you've seen Behind the Candelabra with Michael Douglas and Matt Damon, you know what I'm talking about. In the mid-1980s, Liberace's health began to decline. He was diagnosed with AIDS, but he chose to keep it private, citing a water retention issue instead. Even in his final days, he was determined to protect his image. On February 4, 1987, Liberace passed away, officially from heart failure. Later, a coroner's report revealed he had died of complications related to AIDS. It's tragic, really. Liberace was one of the most famous figures of his time. Yet the stigma surrounding HIV/AIDS was so intense that efforts were made to hide the truth about his death. Charles Nelson Reilly. Now, you might know Charles as the larger-than-life hysterical guy from Match Game.
Well, hello, James Lipton. I'm King Lord.
You know, the one with the wild glasses and witty comebacks? But behind all that fabulous humor was a pretty fascinating life story. Let's break it down. Charles was born in the Bronx in 1931. His childhood? Not exactly a walk in Central Park. His father lost his job during the Great Depression, and his mom was, let's just say, a bit much. And you know how some kids dream of being a firefighter or an astronaut? Charles? He was all about the stage. From a young age, he was obsessed with theater and would even put on little shows in his backyard. Fast forward to the 50s, Charles knew he wanted to act, so he moved to New York City to chase that Broadway dream. And boy, did he grind, like he did everything. Off-Broadway, teaching acting classes, and even a Tony Award nomination for his role in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. But here's the thing, Hollywood was still pretty stuffy back then. If you weren't the rugged leading man type, good luck. Charles had to fight for roles because he was, different. But his charm and wit? That's what made him stand out. People couldn't help but love him. He carved his niche as the funny, flamboyant sidekick type, especially on game shows like Match Game. Iconic. Charles Nelson Reilly's sexuality was a significant part of his identity, even if he, like many others of his era, navigated it with nuance, discretion, and humor. In a time when being openly gay could derail a career, Reilly, alongside contemporaries like Paul Lynde and Rip Taylor, found ways to express himself through coded humor, campy performances, and a larger-than-life persona. Reilly didn't hide who he was, but also didn't openly discuss his sexuality in a serious way. He had a long-term partner, Patrick Hughes, who was by his side for over 30 years. Talk about low-key relationship goals. It's like he was saying, "I don't need your validation, I'm living my truth." We love to see it. Charles was much more than just a game show personality. He was also a director, a teacher, and an actor who truly loved the craft. He even had a one-man show called Save It for the Stage, The Life of Reilly, which gave audiences a peek into his quirky, hilarious life story. Graham Chapman, let's talk about Graham Chapman before all the fame and before Monty Python took over the world.
So do I.
There's so much. I was in a pub the other day, and I overheard...
Chapman was born in 1941 in England. He grew up in a middle-class family, and though he was known to be a bit of a misfit in school, he had a clear knack for comedy from a young age. Funny enough, Chapman was actually studying medicine at Cambridge University before his comedic genius really took off. Imagine, Dr. Graham Chapman, and then, a few years later, one of the funniest guys to ever live. He ended up quitting medical school to pursue acting and comedy, and the rest is, well, history. But let's get to the juicy part. Now, most of you probably know him as one of the genius minds behind Monty Python's Flying Circus, the sketch comedy show that's still legendary today. But here's the twist. Chapman's personal life wasn't as simple as his outrageous comedy. The man had to live in a time where being open about your sexuality wasn't just frowned upon. It could make or break your career. But guess what? Chapman didn't let that stop him. Graham Chapman was one of the first big comedy stars in the public eye to openly come out as gay. Now coming out in the 1970s, especially for a public figure in Hollywood, was huge, a risky move that could make or break your career. People like Rock Hudson were still in the closet, and gay rights were far from being accepted by the mainstream. But Graham didn't shy away from it. In fact, in a 1972 interview with the London Evening Standard, he proudly said, "I'm gay." He was one of the first British celebrities to be so open about his sexuality. Chapman wasn't just known for his groundbreaking work in comedy, though. He was a brilliant writer, director, and performer. His writing skills were essential in the success of Monty Python's Flying Circus, and if you're a fan of Life of Brian, you'll know how brilliantly he crafted material that challenged social norms. Now let's talk about Graham's personal life. As far as relationships go, Graham Chapman was deeply in love with his partner David Sherlock for over 2 decades. It's kind of refreshing, right? Even though he lived in a time where LGBTQ+ couples weren't really accepted, Chapman found true love and stayed with him until the end of his life. But things weren't always perfect. They had their ups and downs like any couple, especially when living in the public eye and dealing with societal pressures. Unfortunately, Graham's life was cut short by cancer. He passed away in 1989 at the age of 48, leaving a legacy not just in comedy, but as one of the first public LGBTQ+ icons in entertainment. His death was a huge loss to the industry, both because of his groundbreaking comedic talents and because he paved the way for more visibility of queer people in the public eye. Rudolph Valentino. All right, folks, let's turn the spotlight onto a true icon of the silent film era, Rudolph Valentino. Known as the Latin lover and one of Hollywood's first ever sex symbols, Valentino wasn't just a heartthrob, he was a cultural phenomenon. Rudy, as his friends called him, was born in 1895 in Castellaneta, Italy, as Rodolfo Pietro Filiberto Raffaello Guglielmi di Valentina d'Antonguola. Yeah, try saying that 5 times fast. Growing up, he wasn't exactly destined for stardom. He wasn't great in school, struggled to find direction, and eventually emigrated to the US in 1913 to try his luck. At first, he wasn't a star. He was a dishwasher, gardener, and even a tango dancer to make ends meet. All right, let's talk about Rudolph Valentino's pre-Hollywood days. One of his first gigs is working as a taxi dancer at Maxim's Restaurant Cabaret. Now, what's a taxi dancer, you ask? Picture this: wealthy women paying for dances, and maybe a little extra, with dashing men known as tango pirates. Yep, Valentino was living the tango pirate lifestyle, which, let's be honest, sounds like the plot of a Netflix drama waiting to happen. But this line of work wasn't exactly the best for his reputation. Though he eventually moved up to the more respectable ballroom dancing circuit, things took a dark turn when he got tangled up in a messy divorce case. Valentino's charm earned him favor with several influential women, including Blanca de Sol, a wealthy and unhappily married socialite. Their relationship, whether romantic or platonic, is unclear, but Valentino soon became embroiled in her messy divorce. When Blanca was accused of murdering her husband, Valentino served as a character witness. The scandal painted him as a gold digger and tarnished his reputation in New York society. Shortly after, Valentino found himself arrested for vice, a vague but damning charge that probably wasn't a coincidence. Many believed it was a setup, retaliation from powerful figures upset by his role in the divorce scandal. His burgeoning career and respectable name took a hit, so what did Valentino do? He packed his bags and headed west to start over in Hollywood. That move turned out to be a smart one, because it wasn't long before he transformed from a tango dancing scandal magnate to one of the biggest stars in silent film history. And then, boom, The Chic happened in 1921, and Rudolph Valentino became the ultimate matinee idol. He was the guy who redefined male sexuality on screen. The suits, the smolder, the sultry dances, it was all Valentino. He basically invented the brooding leading man archetype. But fame comes with a price, and Valentino's life was full of drama. His movies made millions, but his personal life was basically a tabloid's dream. First, there were constant rumors about his sexuality. Some said he was gay, others claimed he was bisexual. And back in the 1920s, even a whisper of that kind of thing could ruin you. Valentino's fame exploded during the 1920s, fueled by the rise of sensationalist tabloids. Some male critics mocked him as effeminate or questioned his sexuality, dubbing him the pink powder puff. Valentino, deeply hurt by these accusations, publicly defended his masculinity. He once challenged a journalist to a boxing match to prove his manhood, though the fight never occurred. His first marriage to actress Jean Acker was basically a disaster. They separated the same day they got married. And people speculated that the whole thing was a lavender marriage, meant to hide his true orientation. Then in 1922, Valentino married costume designer Natasha Rambova, a relationship that was both passionate and tumultuous. Rambova, known for her strong personality, was said to dominate the marriage, leading to clashes with studio executives. The press portrayed Valentino as henpecked, further fueling speculation about his masculinity. When the couple married in Mexico, without waiting for his divorce from Acker to finalize, Valentino was briefly arrested for bigamy, adding yet another scandal to his name. Despite the controversies, Valentino's star power was undeniable. Films like Blood and Sand, 1922, and The Son of the Sheik, 1926, drew huge audiences, cementing his status as one of Hollywood's first true box office draws. He became an international sensation, with fans across the globe swooning over his smoldering gaze and romantic on-screen presence. At the height of his fame, Valentino's life was cut tragically short. In August 1926, while in New York promoting The Son of the Sheik, he fell ill with severe abdominal pain. Diagnosed with a perforated ulcer and acute appendicitis, Valentino underwent surgery. Though he initially appeared to recover, complications set in, and he succumbed to peritonitis on August 23, 1926, at just 31 years old. His death sent shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond. Fans gathered outside the hospital in hysterics, and thousands attended his funeral in New York, where riots broke out as grief-stricken admirers tried to catch a glimpse of their idol. His body was transported to Los Angeles for a second funeral, but the reception there was far more subdued. A stark contrast to the frenzy in New York. Jim Nabors. All right, let's talk about Jim Nabors. Best known for his unforgettable portrayal of Gomer Pyle on The Andy Griffith Show and later Gomer Pyle, USMC.
Sergeant Carter, I got my voice back. I can sing.
Jim Nabors was the ultimate combination of comedic timing and a voice that could move mountains. His rich baritone singing voice was a sharp contrast to his goofy, lovable on-screen persona, making him one of the most unique stars of his time. Jim Nabors was born on June 12, 1930, in Sylacauga, Alabama. Growing up in the Deep South, he had a relatively quiet childhood, marked by his love of music and performing. He was a bit of an introvert as a child, preferring to sing at home or in church rather than seek the limelight. Nabors studied at the University of Alabama, where he majored in business administration. Initially, Hollywood wasn't on his radar. His path there was anything but typical. Before making it big, Jim worked behind the scenes in showbiz. He started as a film cutter and later as a secretary at NBC in Los Angeles. Nabors performed in local cabarets, using his comedic talent and that distinctive Southern drawl to entertain crowds. One night, his cabaret act caught the attention of the Andy Griffith Show producer Danny Thomas. Nabors was invited to audition for the show, and the rest is history. Introduced as the lovable, bumbling mechanic Gomer Pyle, Nabors turned a one-episode gig into a recurring role that fans adored. Gomer's catchphrases like Shazam and Golly became a part of pop culture. He later got his own spin-off, Gomer Pyle, USMC, which was a huge hit, showcasing his comedic genius. What really set Nabors apart, though, was his incredible singing voice. In stark contrast to Gomer's goofy demeanor, Nabors had a powerful operatic baritone voice that left audiences stunned. He released dozens of albums over the years, earning gold and platinum records, and performed at events like the Indianapolis 500, a tradition he kept for decades. Jim Nabors lived much of his life as a private person, especially when it came to his personal relationships. His sexuality was a topic of quiet speculation for much of his career, but he managed to navigate Hollywood's often stifling atmosphere with grace, discretion, and humor. Nabors lived during a time when being openly gay in the entertainment industry could have devastating consequences for a performer's career. While he never officially came out during the peak of his fame, his sexual orientation was something of an open secret in Hollywood, particularly among his close circle of friends. One of the most enduring myths surrounding Nabors was the rumor of a marriage to Rock Hudson in the 1970s. The story began as a joke among gay circles in Los Angeles and somehow spiraled into tabloid headlines. Supposedly, Nabors and Hudson had a secret wedding, with Nabors adopting the playful moniker Gomer Pyle Nabors Hudson. This urban legend, while untrue, reflects the larger culture of coded humor that gay communities relied upon during a time of widespread discrimination. Nabors and Hudson were friendly acquaintances, but never romantically involved. It wasn't until 2013, at the age of 82, that Jim Nabors publicly acknowledged his sexuality in a meaningful way. He married his longtime partner Stan Cadwallader in a private ceremony in Washington state shortly after same-sex marriage was legalized there. The couple had been together for nearly 4 decades by that point, quietly building a life of love and companionship away from the spotlight. James Mitchell. James Mitchell was born on May 2, 1928 in Peoria, Illinois, and showed an early interest in the performing arts. His love for dance led him to pursue a career in ballet. After training at the prestigious School of American Ballet, Mitchell went on to perform with several renowned dance companies, including the American Ballet Theater. Mitchell's classical training and athleticism made him a standout performer in his field. He eventually transitioned to a career in television and film, but his deep roots in dance were never forgotten, as he was often praised for his physicality and grace. Mitchell's most iconic role was as Palmer Cortlandt on All My Children, a role he played for over 3 decades. He joined the show in 1979, and Palmer became one of the soap opera's central characters. His portrayal of the wealthy, often scheming Cortlandt made him a fan favorite, and he became a cornerstone of the show's many dramatic twists and turns. His character of Palmer was known for his complex personality, a charming yet manipulative figure, whose interactions with others drove much of the series' conflicts. Mitchell's ability to balance Palmer's more villainous traits with moments of vulnerability allowed the character to remain a compelling presence on the show throughout its run. James Mitchell's sexuality, though never publicly discussed in detail, was an open secret within the entertainment industry. While he never made overt public statements about being gay, many people in Hollywood and his close colleagues knew of his sexual orientation. Mitchell was part of a generation of performers who had to balance their careers with the limitations placed on LGBTQ+ individuals in the entertainment world during the 20th century. His personal life was kept relatively private compared to more outspoken contemporaries, and he did not actively engage with the press about his relationships. However, Mitchell's homosexuality was known to people in the industry, particularly those he worked with closely, like his All My Children co-stars. He was often seen as a private individual who preferred to keep his focus on his work rather than on the public scrutiny of his personal life. Mitchell passed away on January 22, 2010, at the age of 81 after a battle with lung cancer. His death was mourned by fans and colleagues alike, who celebrated his immense contributions to both television and the world of dance. So, what do you think? Pretty wild, right? These Hollywood legends were living in a world of secrets and scandals, all while creating some of the most iconic films ever made. A lot of them have paved the way for more openness and acceptance in Hollywood today. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did any of these stories surprise you? And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more juicy Hollywood tea. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you in the next one.